You know, I never thought retirement would turn me into the neighborhood's most wanted man, but here we are. I spent 40 years designing industrial gearboxes, solid, efficient, dependable things. When I retired, I figured I'd finally relax, maybe pick up golf like my wife suggested. But after a week of daytime TV and folding laundry, my brain started to melt. I needed to build something that made sense to me. So, I built a birdhouse. Well, not just any birdhouse. It was a 3-story, cedarwood mansion for birds, complete with balconies, a mini tiki roof, and a little water fountain that trickled down river stones. I carved a sign that said live, laugh, chirp. I called it the Aviary Grand. My wife, Laura, laughed when she saw it. "Tom," she said, "you've officially lost it." Maybe she was right. But for the first time in months, I felt alive again. For about 3 days, I lived in bliss, watching sparrows land, hearing the gentle trickle of that fountain, until the beige envelope showed up in my mailbox. You know the one, the kind that smells like trouble. The letterhead read, Silver Pines Homeowners Association, Architectural Review Committee. And right below that, in Times New Roman, were the words, "Every homeowner dreads. It has come to our attention." The letter claimed my birdhouse violated at least 6 bylaws. It was too big, too colorful. A visual nuisance, they called it. The HOA president, a woman named Carol Whitman, was notorious around here. Every Christmas, she measured people's lights with a ruler. Every spring, she sent warnings about grass height. Her yard had one of those creepy concrete geese she dressed up for the seasons. And she was calling my work a nuisance. Laura tried to calm me down, but I couldn't let it go. 14 days to remove it, the letter said. 14 days to destroy the only thing that had made me feel useful in half a year. I wasn't going to do it. I marched straight across the street and rang Carol's doorbell. She opened it with that tight, fake smile. Clipboard in hand, beige suit, like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. "Carol," I said, holding up the letter, "you're seriously calling my birdhouse a violation?" "It's not a birdhouse, Tom," she replied sweetly. "It's an unapproved auxiliary structure exceeding 4 cubic feet. It's for the birds, Carol. They're not paying rent." "Doesn't matter," she said. "We have standards to maintain. We can't have chaos." I swear, she actually said chaos. Like a 4-foot birdhouse was the fall of civilization. She smiled again, this time sharper. 14 days, Tom. Have a lovely afternoon." Then she closed the door. That night, I sat on my porch staring at my creation, and I thought about her favorite phrase, architectural harmony. Carol wanted everything beige and boring, every house the same box, every yard the same silence. She wanted order. I wanted life. So, I decided if she wanted harmony, she was going to get it in the most literal way possible. The next morning, I rolled out my old drafting tools. I pulled out the blueprints for my house and started sketching. My plan: build a new birdhouse, an exact miniature replica of my own home. Beige siding, white shutters, even a tiny garage. Perfectly compliant. Perfectly absurd. When I called construction companies, most hung up as soon as they heard the words birdhouse and scale model. But then I found a guy named Rick, a gruff contractor who looked like he'd seen everything twice. He showed up with his apprentice, his nephew, Evan, a kid with a backwards hat and a phone constantly recording. "So," Rick said, staring at my plans, "you're paying me to build a tiny house?" "It's a birdhouse," I corrected. "A protest birdhouse." Evan's eyes lit up. "Dude, this is gold. HOA drama? TikTok will eat this up." A week later, the sound of a cement mixer echoed across my yard. They poured a tiny foundation, 4 feet wide, 2.5 feet deep. That's when Carol's beige SUV rolled by, slowing just enough for me to see her glare through the window. She knew something was coming. As the frame went up, so did the tension. Carol started taping new violation letters to my door. Unapproved construction. Noise disturbance. One even said illegal timber dimensions. I pinned them all to my fridge like trophies. Then one afternoon, a police cruiser pulled up. 2 officers stepped out, both trying very hard not to laugh. "Sir," one said, "we got a report of an unpermitted dwelling unit being built here." I pointed proudly. "It's a birdhouse, officer. See the little door?" They looked at each other, then at me, then back at the birdhouse. The younger cop finally broke into a grin. "Dispatch," he said into his radio, "the unpermitted dwelling is, in fact, a birdhouse, over. Evan filmed the whole thing. The video blew up overnight. Millions of views. Headlines like, HOA President calls cops on retired engineer's birdhouse. Carol became a meme. I became a folk hero. That's when she snapped. A week later, I got a thick envelope from her lawyers. They were threatening to sue, claiming my structure violated community covenants and caused emotional distress. Laura begged me to drop it, but I couldn't. This wasn't about birds anymore. It was about freedom and a little bit of petty revenge. So I did what any rational man fueled by caffeine and spite would do. I read the entire 300-page HOA bylaw manual. It was agony. Fence heights, mailbox paint shades, shrubbery regulations. Then, around 2 a.m., I found it. Clause 26B, Decorative Garden Follies. A folly, it said, is a structure built purely for decoration that resembles a functional building. And here's the kicker. It had no size limit. I nearly laughed out loud. My birdhouse wasn't a house. It was a decorative garden folly. Completely legal. A week later, Carol held an emergency HOA meeting to vote on removing my monstrosity. The community hall was packed. Neighbors, reporters, even kids with cameras. Carol stood at the podium with a PowerPoint full of rules, charts, and photos of my project under ominous red circles. She droned on about community standards and property values until people started yawning. When it was my turn, I walked to the front with Rick and Evan. We had something under a cloth. Evening, everyone, I started. I'm the guy with the monstrosity. Laughter rippled through the room. I get it, I said. It's weird. But you know what? It made me feel alive again. I built something with my hands, and for the first time in years, people actually stopped to talk to me. Kids point at it, neighbors smile. Maybe it's not perfect, but it's ours. And according to your own bylaws. I nodded at Evan. He yanked off the cloth, revealing a tiny model of the birdhouse, with a little garden gnome fishing by the door. This isn't a birdhouse, I said, holding up the paper. It's a Class C lawn decoration. A decorative garden folly. And that gnome right there? He's the rightful owner. The room went silent. Then someone burst out laughing. Then another. Within seconds, the whole place was roaring. Even the news camera crew was shaking from trying not to laugh. Carol's face turned the color of overcooked shrimp. The vote was quick, 6-1. Her one vote, against herself. 2 weeks later, her for sale sign went up. Her concrete goose wore a tiny sombrero the day the movers came. I like to think that was her final act of defiance. And me? I finished the birdhouse. We installed a solar porch light, tiny shutters, even a miniature welcome mat that said home tweet home. A pair of bluebirds moved in within days. Watching them build their nest, I realized it wasn't really about winning. It was about building something joyful in a place that tried so hard to be joyless. Now, when I sit on my porch with Laura and watch those birds flutter in and out, I can't help but smile. Rick still drops by sometimes, pretending it's for maintenance, but I know he just wants to admire his weirdest project ever. And lately, well, let's just say I've been sketching again. My neighbor Jim's got a sad little plastic doghouse in his yard, and I was thinking maybe, just maybe, his beagle deserves something better. A proper home. Something in perfect architectural harmony with his own. Anyway, that's the story of how a bored retiree accidentally declared war on an HOA and won, using nothing but a blueprint, a loophole, and a little bit of madness. So tell me, if your HOA tried to pull something like that, would you fight back or would you cave? Let me know in the comments. I've got my hammer ready just in case.